Hello everyone, my name is Adam Goodrich, and this video is aimed at supporting with medium-term planning and how that could look like via remote teaching. The aim of this is to avoid, the best we can, the situation when we have got to go through all the content that's been delivered remotely when we return to school. We will end up back where we started. Where possible, we need to ensure all students have learnt the content, not just covered it. We teachers have undergone a steep learning curve ourselves, moving from the physical classroom to becoming virtual novices. As always though, as a group of amazing professionals across the country, we have been able to adapt to the situation and rise to the occasion to support the children who we care about. This video does not have all of the answers. I'm not sure if anyone actually does, as this is new territory for all of us. What I have tried to do is pull together some of the key research from a range of different sources on what successful medium-term planning looks like and match that up to the limited research out there on remote learning. This video can be used by individual teachers looking to support with learning for those students we may not see for a long time. It could also be used by groups of teachers or departments to consider common approaches to remote learning and consider some of the many questions I posed throughout the video, which appear at the end of each chapter when the slide with this symbol appears. I would suggest pausing the video when these questions appear and take time to reflect and discuss your answers to these questions. This may be a useful guide to further accelerate learning during students' time at home. So, teachers have been taken out of the comfort of our classrooms and now been faced with the task of teaching from home. For most of us, we were probably thinking about how we will set work, what platform to use, how will we share the resources with students. Basically, we started by keeping students busy. It felt a little bit like setting a cover lesson. So we have possibly been more focused on delivering the online lessons and possibly less focused on how we can support students in actually learning the work. The purpose of this video is to use evidence based on lesson planning, medium-term planning and remote learning and combine that knowledge into a set of clear thought processes to maximise student learning so that when we next see them face to face back in our classrooms, we can pick up from where we left off and not just repeat the work again, or at least reduce the chances of this situation happening. Remote learning is different to learning in a physical classroom. The habits we have developed to support students' working memory by writing key notes on the board as we talk, by repeating the key messages by simply pointing and gesticulating, keeping students on task, the non-stop verbal feedback students receive face to face. Those habits are largely redundant when learning remotely. We need to develop a brand new set of habits quickly for the medium term. So how can we ensure these key messages are repeated? How can we ensure students are receiving feedback and all the other factors needed to ensure content isn't just taught, the content is learnt? I'll be going through just some of the key features of what I've identified as the 12 key parts of successful remote learning medium-term planning. If teachers are able to focus on just a few of these areas, you are giving students a better chance of learning at home and being successful. So the 12 chapters are as follows. It is likely that we will not see some year groups now until at least September. I would strongly urge you to really think about what it is you want students to learn between now and the summer holidays. Make a list of all the key facts, strategies, takeaway messages from the scheme of work you are delivering between now and the summer. Have a very clear picture of what it is you want students to learn over these weeks. The challenge here is identifying the content you believe students can access through remote learning. There may be some topics that rely on students being in the classroom with you, so ensuring the content is appropriate for remote learning is an essential initial starting point for planning for the next half term. It could be useful here to discuss this with the rest of your department so that everyone starts off in September at the same point. Now that you have identified the topics you will be delivering, it is now time to think about structuring these lessons. Students don't learn everything in a nice, compact 1 hour lesson. They learn it over time. It is essential you know what it is you want students to have learnt. You may also be able to find links between these facts to help students learn them. This is a great quote from Peps McCrea. To achieve this, you need to be really clear on what it is you want students to learn by the end of the summer term, and this will involve a lot of thinking time and possibly communication with others who will be delivering this unit of work too. Sharing ideas is a great way to improve planning for progress. Mapping out what you want students to learn will take time, but it'll be a worthwhile investment if you truly want students to learn and make progress. Another great quote from Peps McCrea is this: "So what information are we passing on to students remotely? Is it the right information to support with today's learning outcome? Are the most important takeaway messages highlighted and made explicit so students know the importance of this sentence or key fact? In normal lessons, we would emphasize these messages in the way we speak, the volume we say it, or through gesticulating. That is pretty much lost through remote learning. So how else can we emphasize these key points and be specific and precise? In the book, Dual Coding for Teachers, Francis Miller suggests the following. Perhaps when providing students with information, whether it be a piece of text, a live video, or a pre-recorded video, having a diagram to support the video could help students learn the new material. There are lots of different types of diagrams which can be found in the Smart Art section of PowerPoint. It may be worth exploring the use of these when delivering new content, a useful diagram that students can refer to and use to scaffold their own learning. Can you produce or find videos that include you or someone else modelling the work? Perhaps rather than the student seeing your face, the camera instead focuses on your hands writing on a piece of paper as you talk, drawing a diagram to support what you are saying, or constructing a short paragraph as you model your answer to a particular question. Another area to consider now is how much information you need to provide to students to help them achieve the learning outcome. Doug Lemov calls this the shortest path. To support students with remote learning, now more than ever, we really need to consider the least amount of information students need in order to learn. Peps McCrea suggests this useful question to consider. Take some time to think about reducing the amount of words you are using or saying when planning remote lessons. There is always less to be done. With the best planned remote teaching, there will be times when students simply do not understand. In the classroom, there are a range of ways of identifying these instances and dealing with them. Remote teaching, however, makes this challenging. This is why possibly the EEF highlighted the need for students to work independently. For example, prompting students to reflect on their work or to consider the strategies they will use if they get stuck have been highlighted as valuable. In your subject, what can students do if they are stuck? Can you plan for time in one of your lessons to share with students strategies they can use when they are stuck, when there isn't someone there to help them? Perhaps this is a useful conversation to have with members of your department. Share ideas and strategies and produce a list of ideas that can be shared with students and maybe even parents and carers too. Parents can play a crucial role in remote teaching leading to remote learning. An essential feature of Rosenshine's principles is that effective teachers regularly check for understanding. We cannot assume that because we have given them information or we have covered that part of the scheme of work, the students have actually learnt it. Teachers need feedback from the students. If you want to improve remote lesson planning, you'll need to determine what's working and what's not with the information students are being given. This is almost impossible to do without reliable and efficient methods of assessing pupil progress. Using Microsoft Forms or other online quizzing platforms can be used to produce a quiz. This opportunity to complete a low-stakes quiz allows the students to complete both multiple choice and short answered questions. There is research showing that short answered questions might improve learning more than multiple choice questions because they're requiring students to come up with the answers themselves. Yet multiple choice questions are easier to put together and mark. You can also preset the answers in Microsoft Forms so it marks it for you. You could even create a hybrid format of both short answered questions and multiple choice questions to check understanding. Quizzes can be used in a variety of different ways. It could be the sole piece of work for students to complete during the lesson. Alternatively, a short quiz can be produced relatively quickly to act as a sort of exit ticket. One or two questions that students need to complete at the end of a remote lesson. You can then use this information to determine the success of the lesson. Did students learn what you wanted them to learn? You can use this feedback from the students to plan future lessons. Were the key messages explicit enough? Were they repeated successfully? Do they need to be repeated next lesson? Were there misconceptions in the students' work? Do students require some detailed feedback at this point before moving on and building on this learning? How will you provide that feedback remotely? The EEF stated the following in their remote learning guidance. One of the key issues with using technology for retrieval practice, perhaps the lack of opportunity, provides students with immediate feedback. Are there any online quizzes available in your subject that provide detailed instant feedback that you can use? It may be worthwhile asking others in your department or putting a message out on social media to see what is already out there online that you can use. We want to build learning that lasts, not just give students something to do to keep them busy. Teachers need to plan what the students are going to think during this lesson. Does your wonderful PowerPoint have images floating in and, for example, cartoon animals that have no relevance to the lesson? If so, remove them. Students only have so much they can process at once. If they open your PowerPoint and see a cartoon elephant and various other animals or the logo of the website you may have once found the PowerPoint on, and hidden somewhere amongst that is the key bit of information you want them to learn, I can bet you they will only remember the elephant. Delete images and text that are distractions. Only include the information you want students to think about. Now you are supporting their working memory and reducing cognitive load. Now you're improving students' potential for remote learning. Another question to consider is, are students learning something brand new today? Are they building on prior learning, or are they being given a chance to practice learning skills you have previously modelled before? Your explanations for brand new will need to be clear, concise, explicit and purposeful. If it builds on prior learning, consider how you will make those links and anchor their thinking. What information do students need from you to support them with building on this work? Maybe videos from past lessons, or key messages given to them, again, so they can build on this learning. If it's a chance to consolidate and practice using previously taught skills, what support and challenge will you need to plan? Again, how will you provide that support? Will it be via videos or key messages written on a piece of text? When planning lessons, it's also useful to consider a range of different tasks, but keeping a similar theme or structure to each lesson is essential. This supports long-term learning. Change the lesson too much, and the student's attention moves away from the lesson content and to the lesson task instead. The key is to keep the lesson structure pretty much the same. There are some ways to slightly alter similar tasks within the same lesson structure though. Tom Sherrington writes in Rosenshine's Principles in Action that it's useful to vary the diet of learning, and Tom suggests some of the following tasks. A number of these strategies can be given to students as work to do that do not require technology. Let's not forget, Looking at a computer screen for several hours each day is exhausting, and some students don't have the luxury of having their own device for the whole day to complete work on. Giving students tasks they can do away from the computer will vary their diet and potentially increase the amount of work they are completing if they need to share devices with other family members. You can increase the chances of successful learning by identifying parts of your lesson or series of lessons where students are going to struggle or make mistakes. You could even make the mistakes yourself on purpose, of course, during your own model solutions. Address them head on. Show how easy it is to make them, so if students do make these mistakes, you can guide and support them. Mike Burns suggests signposting the pitfalls. He says the following: how can you model and explain these areas more clearly so that learners negotiate them successfully? Doing this in the classroom is potentially challenging. Highlighting these misconceptions and common mistakes via remote learning is possibly a whole new level of challenge for teachers. If the teacher is producing a video themselves, then consider signposting these common mistakes. If not, how else can you highlight these mistakes? When do you highlight them? Providing students with feedback after they have already made the mistake, of course, is useful, but providing them with feed forward and explicitly informing them of the common mistakes in advance of them completing the work will improve their chances of learning. There are no shortcuts to learning. Practice is a vital ingredient to support long-term learning. As Professor John West Burnham says, learning from home has many challenges for students. Planning for opportunities to practice and practice and practice some more may feel like it's a bit of a cop-out lesson, but students will need more time than they would with you in a classroom to just practice. We have to accept that feedback will be different and less frequent during these coming weeks, but it will be even more important than ever. We will need to find a range of different ways to gather feedback from the students on how they are getting on with learning new topics. Planning for opportunities to link topics together allows for that necessary practice and gives a form of challenge to the task. So no new content is being taught, but the opportunity is there to link more than one previously taught topic together and practice them, both separately and as a larger interconnected topic. As we know, learning is something that happens over time, not something that can be divided up neatly into individual lessons. The key thing to consider here is that the relationship between lessons is just as important as to what happens within them. When planning remote lessons that focus on learning, it is important to provide time during every lesson to revisit previous learning, which could include opportunities to assess student understanding of what you are planning to teach next lesson. Are they ready to move on to the new content if they haven't yet understood the prerequisite knowledge? How will you get the feedback from the students remotely? The EEF stated that evidence was inconclusive about the difference between delivering live lessons and using pre-recorded material. It is the teaching quality that is more important. When you are planning individual lessons, how are you communicating key messages? Are students being fed a diet of videos or written text or a combination of the two? Either way, how are the key messages being communicated? Do students know exactly what is expected of them? What is it you are specifically looking for students to do? And is there a way that you could model this? Perhaps even showing a brief structure of an A4 piece of paper and uploading this as a guide to support students so they know what it is you want from them to do. During a normal classroom-based lesson, by simply walking around the classroom and having a glimpse at students' work, you can quickly identify students who are not quite doing what you expect, and you can quickly address that and support them. This is a luxury we do not have when teaching remotely. We now need to be even more explicit about what we expect from students than we ever have done before. If we want them to be creative and produce the work however they like, let them know. This is a quote from Mike Gershon. He suggests that one of the most effective ways to share the success criteria with students is through sharing examples of good work, whether that is a teacher modelling what it is that they're expecting of students, or even sharing other students' work as examples of excellent work and explain why it is excellent, what made it excellent. Providing remote feedback can be done effectively in a number of ways. The key is to ensure feedback is focused on learning goals when the success criteria have been shared with students. Feedback is designed to make students think about their work. The feedback should also be more work for the students, not the teacher. So when the teachers are providing feedback, what are you expecting students to do with this feedback? Crucially to remote learning is planning for the opportunity for students to dedicate time acting on the feedback and for the teacher to then find out if that feedback has been acted on and how students have got on with the work. How will you know they have read the feedback? One solution could be to provide them with a short online quiz. Using Microsoft Forms, for example, they can say they've read the feedback and answer one or two short questions based on that feedback. It would be really useful to provide students with an opportunity to recall this knowledge in future lessons in order to see if they can remember it. Again, how will teachers do this? How will you get this feedback from students to assess if they have understood it? Ensuring work is accessible for all students is vital to support disadvantaged students. Can work be set allowing students to take ownership by choosing which task they will complete, with the same learning outcome at the end? They are still learning about a given topic, but their work will look different to others. Perhaps those who can only access a laptop or mobile phone for a limited time in a day can produce written work or create something rather than completing work online or through a PowerPoint. There is a real need to make remote learning accessible for all. Upskilling students on how to self-assess could be a huge benefit to students who do not have access or have limited access to a laptop or other device. Tom Sherrington discusses the benefits of self-assessing in the learning rainforest. It may be of use for one of the student's teachers to spend some time on the phone perhaps or through a live chat, giving students instructions on how they can self-assess or continue learning or consolidating their work without the need of technology. This could be the start of a useful conversation for teachers and leaders who are in charge of provision for disadvantaged students. Having a clear plan in place before the start of the half term, knowing where you want each class to end up at the end of the term, means you can preempt resources students may need in 2, 3 or 5 weeks' time. This can provide teachers with the opportunity to get key resources and information to students as a hard copy. Most schools remain open for children of key workers and therefore may have the capacity to forward resources to staff who can print them out and get them posted to students. This will probably take a lot of time, so assume that students will not receive this work for at least 2 weeks. Make sure there is a note or a letter in there giving students clear instructions on how to use this pack and when each piece of work needs to be completed. Or it may be work they complete any time, especially if they're unable to access work online at all. This could be their only source of work from school. If so, there is an even bigger challenge facing teachers. How can this work sent home move from keeping students busy zone and move into the learning new content zone? What information do these students need to learn? How are teachers going to provide that knowledge and signpost the key learning? Having physical copies to complete at home could be a wonderful strategy to reduce the attainment gap with disadvantaged students in your school. This is a quote from the EEF. A challenging question for teachers to ask is, how can we set up a platform allowing students to interact and discuss learning? How can we foster a culture of competition to motivate students? There could be opportunities to incorporate ipsative assessment into lessons, perhaps on a weekly or fortnightly basis. Ipsative assessment, simply put, is progress based around beating your own personal best. So how can ipsative assessment be used remotely? You could consider pairing students up. Give them a test online in week 2, then retest them again on that content in week 4, and see which pair has made the most progress during that time. How many more marks collectively have they gained? This is different to which pair has scored the most points, as you are solely praising the progress that's been made. This would also give a competitive edge to the group too, and support with motivating students. The value of collaborative approaches is regularly emphasised, and the EEF guidance for remote learning states the following. How can you use this evidence-based research and apply it to your lessons? Students working together can support learning if used effectively. Peer assessment needs to be focused on improvement. How can teachers provide opportunities during the medium-term plan for students to see each other's work and provide meaningful feedback? Will this feedback be shared only with that person? And if so, how? Or would it be made public for everyone to see? How will students feel about their work being displayed so publicly to others in the group? Will students be given a checklist to identify areas from their peers' work that is missing? Research suggests that students make more effort on their work when they know it is being shared. By explaining that their work will be shared, it gives students a reason to care about their work. Making the work public reinforces the need to produce quality work and gives students a short-term reward. If your school has a method of communicating and sharing information with the school community, you could set up a competition within the group such that after a round or 2 of students completing work, acting upon feedback given to them by their peers and their teachers, after drafting and redrafting their work, students within the group or the teacher themselves will then choose which pieces of work are the top 3, for example, and these pieces of work can be shared with others in the school community through social media, newsletters, and so on. There is a fine line here with challenging students and making the learning too difficult remotely. Our aim, of course, is to get students in the yellow challenge or stretch zone. In lessons, students are provided with regular feedback, hints and scaffolding through teacher dialogue to support them in tackling the most challenging tasks. In the vast majority of remote lessons, this simply isn't possible. If the challenge is too tricky, students will switch off or give up, and end up in the red panic zone, and this will affect their motivation levels. It may just be enough to stop them completing the work altogether. If the work is too easy, then it end up in the blue comfort zone. You may get a couple of pages worth of work back from the students, but they won't actually have learned anything. Getting the level of challenge right for remote learning will be a challenge for teachers. As Guy Claxton says, how will you judge if the work has been too challenging? How can you get feedback from the students if it has been too easy? There will be an element of detective work here needed if teachers are going to pitch the work at the right level to provide opportunities for genuine learning and stretch and challenge in their work at home. I'm going to start this section off with another quote from Tom Sherrington, and a quote that is vital to teachers to absorb, and then reflect on the lessons you have set so far if you have students in your class with a special educational need. So how can teachers adapt the way we structure remote lessons, perhaps through the way information is provided and what information students will be using to learn new content from? What do we expect from SEND students in terms of the work they will be completing, and how do we communicate this clearly with them? This is one of the key problems that teachers will face when planning for remote learning. That ability to plan to support students with special educational needs, and there is of course the need to ensure an inclusive education for all. As Johnson says in the book Research SEND in Ordinary Classrooms, the inclusion of children with ASD is one of the most complex and misunderstood areas of the education system, as many schools struggle to meet the needs of learners with ASD. Students with ASD struggle to communicate with teachers. So one question we'll have to ask ourselves when planning to support these students in our classes is, how can I get feedback to see if they have learnt the work set? How will we know if they are struggling with the work? How can I check for understanding? Whilst in our day-to-day teaching in a classroom, students with ASD generally struggle with the noise, the number of students in a class, and the busyness in a typical classroom, which of course isn't an issue at the moment. Also, research suggests that giving students with ASD different tasks to complete to the rest of the class risks isolating them socially. During this time of students working from home, if managed well, students with ASD could be given different work to complete during remote learning. And by different, I mean the outcome of the end of the lesson or medium-term plan is the same as the rest of the group, but perhaps the way in which the work is structured, scaffolded, and possibly explained to them is more tailored towards their individual needs. Are you able to provide certain students with some material in advance of the next lesson so they, and maybe even their parents or carers, can have a chance to look at some of the key information needed for future lessons? That information could be emailed to these students, perhaps to give them time to digest and absorb the information before having to put it into practice next lesson. Other things to consider include students with visual or hearing difficulties. If you have provided a video to watch, is the audio good enough and clear enough? Some students may be watching videos on their mobile phones, so are there any words on the video they need to read? Can all the students read this? This could be a significant barrier to remote learning. Having a specific plan in place to support SEND students can be the difference between them being excluded from accessing the lesson and being included in the lesson and learning. I hope you have found this useful. Thanks for watching.